to you and welcome to Manfield Circuit here in Fielding for New Zealand's premier motorcycle race, the Castrol 6 Hour. Some of the best riders we have seen, the best field we have seen for this event in recent years, and a lot of riders back from overseas, some of New Zealand's best known motorcycle riders. Let's have a look at who are the leading contenders in this field. Number 1, Alan Delatour on the big VF 1000 Honda V4, co-riding with Dave Martin, and a good bet after qualifying fourth with the reliability of the Honda. Second seeding is New Zealand's Richard Scott, winner of the Australian 6-hour race, teamed with Australian Lenny Willing on the two-stroke four-cylinder RZ500 Yamaha, the bike that won the Australian Castrol 6-hour. Dave Hiscock is back from a South African campaign, teamed with Robert Holden, also back from overseas. They are second fastest on the biggest machine, the GSX 1135 Suzuki. Glenn Williams is the pole qualifier with a flying 1:15.41. He's also back briefly from South Africa and teamed with Ian Perro on the Kawasaki GPZ 900R. Ron Harris will ride with Australian Mike Dowson on another RZ500 Yamaha two-stroke. Harris is always quick on production machinery, and Dowson was Richard Scott's co-rider when they won the Australian event last month. Kiwi Terry Pavil, who's been racing in England, is another back for this prestigious race. He'll team with Marty Dock on a Yamaha RZ500. And in the face of an almost exclusively Japanese field, Kiwis John Britton and Lindsay Williamson will team up on a BMW 1000, which, while a bit off the pace, will undoubtedly be there at the end. So probably the best field of local riders and international riders that we have seen for the Castrol 6 Hour in many years, a mark of the prestige that this event has in New Zealand, as it does in Australia. Weather conditions, you can see there is a very strong wind here at Fielding. It's about 40 knots or gusting to that, and it will be straight ahead as they go into the back straight. It will have more effect on the smaller, less powerful bikes than the big ones. Co-commentating with us again today, a man who has won this event 3 times back in the early years, Graham Crosby. Graham Crosby, you've won this event 3 times. You've already said that it takes a fair amount of discipline and a rider who knows what kind of pace to run in time with his pit stops. Who are you picking now?
Well, talking about paces to run, Tony, it all starts with that run across the track. Now, this is where you find out where the old motorcyclists, or who the old motorcyclists are, by the way they hobble across.
We should point out in that, of course, that some bikes have kick start, some have electric start.
Yes, that's true. The two-stroke RZ500, unfortunately, doesn't have an electric start, but generally most of the four-strokes, well, I think just about every other four-stroke in the race has electric start. So it's in gear, and all he has to do is throw a leg over it, hit the button, let the clutch out, and he's away.
Helping us today down on the pits with the interviews, of course, will be Graham Booth. He's down there now.
Well, there's many ways of starting any sort of motorsport event, and today at Manfield we're going to see one of the most exciting, a Le Mans start, named after the famous sports car race in France. A few minutes, the riders will sprint across the track behind me, leap aboard their machines and go. It's one of the most exciting ways you can see a race start. Ironically enough, they don't start the races at Le Mans this way anymore. They use a conventional start, but here you'll see it today at Manfield.
Quick comparison of the bikes: the Yamaha RZ500, 82 horsepower at 9,000 revs. The GSX 1100 Suzuki, 122 horsepower at 8,500 revs. The Kawasaki GPZ 900, 115 horsepower at 9,500 revs. And the Honda VF 1000, 116 horsepower at 10,000 revs. So you can see there is a lot of horsepower out there, a lot of high speeds, and the best of these bikes capable of 160 miles an hour if you still work in miles an hour. Kilometres an hour don't mean a lot to me, except when they get up over the 250 mark. But needless to say, these bikes are exceptionally quick, and if you stand at the end of the straight, as I was yesterday watching practice, you will have some idea of just how quickly they are going at the end of the straights.
I think on the first lap, Tony, there's going to be a few guys get a bit of a shock because they haven't been practicing in the weather conditions that we've got down here today, and especially with a 40-knot tailwind. there's not going to be that wind resistance that they're normally used to in the braking area, so I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a couple of guys overshoot on the first corner.
Wind resistance is quite intriguing. Dave Hiscock was telling us yesterday that with the fairing on that GSX 1100, you don't feel any wind resistance at all. He said it's quite uncanny to ride.
Well, the aerodynamics of the Suzuki are actually quite good. They protect the rider from the actual wind force on the chest, which is very tiring. And in a race like this, where you've got to put up with it for 6 hours, you know, it can be a hard thing to do.
There are going to be some tired riders by the end of the day. 1 minute to the start. Graham Crosby, what about this circuit?
Well, the circuit today is in good condition. It's dry at least. Maybe it'll keep the weather conditions are I don't know. They reckon it's supposed to be raining this afternoon, and by the looks of the clouds, I guess we might get a thunderstorm or something this afternoon.
Here we go, waiting for the Le Mans start, which, as Graham Booth has just said, ironically is not done at Le Mans anymore. Still done motorcycle meetings, and as we saw at Pukekohe a week ago, it's quite intriguing when you see some of these fellas race over to get on the bike. It doesn't all happen as smoothly as they would perhaps hope. So sometimes the quickest riders are not going to be the first into the first corner. Remember, it's a 6-hour long race, a little like B&H for cars. You've got to discipline yourself to ride the right kind of pace that'll keep you there. They're away, running to the bikes. Glenn Williams straight out there very quickly. Robert Holden getting a little sideways. Glenn Williams, a very good start indeed. Somebody down. Get a look at that in just a moment, but Glenn Williams with a flyer.
Unfortunately, with the Le Mans start, this is the sort of thing that can happen because of so many bikes in the concentrated area, everybody trying to get a good line in the first corner. It's very easy to touch handlebars, and of course, this is the sort of thing that could happen.
Robert Holden getting in front of Glenn Williams into the first corner. Let them settle down for a little while. This sprint is not all that important, except for getting out of the traffic for a lap or two until they start to catch up the slower bikes. Look into that corner. Robert Holden on the big Suzuki. Co-riding with Dave Hiscock. Robert Holden opting to do the first stint. Glenn Williams still behind him. The only advantage they're going to get at this early stage, Graham, is getting away from some of the traffic until they catch it up, which is probably only 4 or 5 laps away.
Well, by the time you get 2 or 3 laps underway, you know, already we've got the field spread out almost over half a lap from the slowest bike to the quickest bike.
Robert Holden, Glenn Williams, I think it's Alan Delatour, 3rd place on the Honda.
I think Robert Holden will probably be doing exactly what he said he'd do at the start, and that's try to get a bit of a gap, because he's going to be changing tyres every time he comes in for fuel, so the best thing he can do is try and get a lot of distance between him and the second man.
That's intriguing, Graham, in terms of tactics. They are intending to change tyres every pit stop. They'll get some advantage, obviously, from the new tyres, but will it be enough?
Well, it's going to have to be, because these bikes, if the tyres are worn in any way, just do not handle at all. And you're looking not at half a second a lap slower, you're looking at least 2 and 3 seconds a lap slower.
So Robert Holden trying to pull out that lead at the moment, while the tyres are still good and while there's no traffic ahead of him. As you can see from the spread of bikes coming around the other parts of the circuit, it won't be long before these front runners are in through lapping slower traffic. And there will be a lot of those riders down the field, a little slower and a little worried right across with. Alan Delatour really pushing Glenn Williams. Rod Harris and Michael Dowson is the entry number 6. Michael Dowson on the bike first up. They're in 4th place. That's the first of the Yamaha RZ 500s. So at the moment, it's Suzuki leading Kawasaki, leading Honda from in 4th place, the Yamaha. So a good spread of manufacturers' machinery over the first few places. And don't worry too much about that Yamaha being a little down. If he can stick with that bunch, he's going to be okay. They need fewer fuel stops. And as we saw in the Castrol 6R in Australia, they need fewer tyre stops as well. Alan Delatour still clinging to the back of Glenn Williams. Glenn Williams has a look over his shoulder. Meanwhile, Robert Holden out in front, pulling away. We'll have a look at that gap in just a moment. First to second, you can see as he goes out of Higgins, Robert Holden, into the back straight. It's a good 30 or 40 metres. And the tactics are that Robert Holden needs to pull out that lead, if they can, to pull away, gain themselves a gap, so that when they come in for tyre and gas, they can get back out without losing a place. They maintain, the Suzuki team, they're very well trained, and it's not hard to believe. They maintain they can change a tyre in less time than it takes to fill the tank with gas, so there's no disadvantage to them in changing the rear tyre. Alan Delatour still keeping Glenn Williams honest, and I wonder how hard Glenn Williams is riding out there, because in practice times the Kawasaki GPZ 900 certainly was faster. Certainly it was faster than the Honda, Graham, so I wonder if Alan Delatour is perhaps riding 9/10 and Glenn Williams 8/10.
I don't think so, Tony, because Alan Delatour's got a lot of experience in this race, and last year he rode the VF 750 to a terrific win.
A little while of settling down now until they start to get into the traffic. Robert Holden still pulling away steadily. I've got a sneaky feeling that it's actually Ian Perro on the bike, not Glenn Williams.
What normally happens here is there's a number 1 and a number 2 rider, and in the 6-hour race in Australia we have both numbers are actually put on the helmet as well, so it's easier to identify, because generally most of the riders have the same leathers, and it is honestly very, very difficult to judge, especially here now where race strategy is coming out, whether to send the fastest rider out first or the guy that's going to be out there at a steady pace.
Often those are last-minute changes. Looking at the style, it looks more like Perro than Williams. Still, Robert Holden out with the lead. Ian Perro in second place on the Kawasaki. So Suzuki, Kawasaki, Honda, Yamaha. Michael Dowson on the Yamaha is back in 4th place, losing a bit too much early on, Graham.
Yeah, well, like I said before, the 40-knot headwinds that they've got going up the back straight, he's only got 82 horsepower. Unfortunately, that's the thing that's going to happen. He just doesn't have the horsepower to get up the back straight. Another interesting thing is that earlier on during the week he was complaining that second gear ratio going onto the back straight, second they were supposed to be getting something like about 6,500 RPM. But of course with the headwind it might be dropping off the power wall.
Alan Delatour still hanging in there. He's not as close as he was a lap or two ago, but I wonder if it's taking Ian Perro just a little while to get into the groove. He said yesterday when we were talking to him, Ian Perro, that normally when he races it's all there naturally and he doesn't have to try, but he said that since he has come to Mansfield this week, he's really been having to try to get in the groove, to get on the pace, and it's been quite an effort.
Well, it is a difficult circuit to go very, very fast. It's a very flowing circuit, so there's no problem just riding it around. But to get it into lap record times, you really have to work at it.
That's 3rd place, Alan Delatour, behind Ian Perro. Robert Holden still pulling away that lead. We'll know in a lap or two whether or not it's going to be enough for them. And when they come in for the first stop, which will be round about the hour mark, bear in mind the Suzukis and the Kawasaki's both use a lot of fuel. Both are trying to get an hour 12, which means 4 stops instead of 5. If they can get an hour 12 out of a tank full of gas, their race strategy will be right off. So if they have to come in early on, that upsets their schedule altogether. It means another 14 or 15 seconds, or perhaps 20 seconds by the time you get back out of the pits. Number 44 having a little off there, and it's a little sandy out there as well. That's Neil McGilvray on the Yamaha RZ350. Had a few people off in practice, Graham. Some having a little difficulty learning the circuit. Robert Holden still pulling away that lead on the big GSX 1135 Suzuki.
I wonder if the headwinds are going to affect the fuel consumption, because the Suzuki's got something like 20 litres, the Kawasaki's got 22 litres, and last weekend that the Kawasaki did have a bit of a problem with fuel consumption when they had trouble making the 1 hour. And they went to the extent of freezing the gas, and unfortunately the block vent, as the gas did expand with the heat, the vent blocked, and of course the tank did expand literally and came off the mountings at the front, and actually Glenn Williams had the tank virtually growing in front of him between his legs as he was going down the back straight.
They've also had some problems with the Kawasaki's with overheating. Now the Kawasaki team have told us that they think that is only because the bikes were new. They now have 4,000 or 5,000 Ks on them and should have loosened up just a little. So they don't expect us to have the same overheating problems. Those problems show themselves when they come into the pits, because while you're riding around, the bike is being cooled because the motor's still turning at reasonable revs, the water pump's going, and the water is circulating. When they come into the pits and the bike's stationary, that's when the overheating problem occurs.
Well, I think they've tried to keep the oil temperatures down to somewhere around the 120 degrees mark, which is fairly high. But today, you know, with the temperatures being, I guess, around the 15 degrees to 17 degrees mark, I don't think we'll have any problems. Whereas last 6-hour race in Australia, you're talking of temperatures up around the 30 to 35 degrees.
If when they come into the pits you see them spraying a fire extinguisher around the front of the motorbike, around the radiator area, that's why they're doing it, is to keep it cool. But that itself creates some problems because of the lack of airflow into the carburetors. They sometimes have problems with starting the bikes. Robert Holden still pulling away that lead. He really has been riding superbly. Yesterday in the 2-hour he went very well.
Robert's had a very successful season in America, racing the superbikes and modified production classes. And at one stage got a ride with the Yoshimura team, which is the most respected superbike team in the States. Robert looks very well in control of the situation here at the moment. He looks as if he's got everything under control.
Have a look at the difference in riding styles of some of these riders. Often that's the only way you can pick who's on the bike. Some of them get right off the seat and virtually hop right down the side of the bike to keep it in the right direction. Others sit almost on top of the seat all of the time. Quite a variation, Graham, in riding style.
That's true, Tony.
Robert Holden hopping off the side and still pulling away that lead. So Suzuki seemingly on schedule to pick up their time, make the fuel stops, and they certainly, as Dave Hiscock pointed out earlier, have the reliability in their favour, if history is any indication. Have a look now and see if we can see the gap back to second place. There's Holden through. Still waiting for Perro. Still waiting for Ian Perro in second place. Here he is.
Alan Delatour has just gone through with a time of 10 seconds between Robert Holden and Alan Delatour. 10 seconds.
So Alan Delatour has got ahead of Ian Perro into second place. So at the moment it is Suzuki, Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha.
With a 10-second advantage, that's 1 second per lap as we're coming up onto the 10th lap. That's not bad. If he can continue on that, he may be able to get enough to ensure a nice quick tyre change, nice clean fuel stop, and carry on with that advantage still on the rest of the competitors.
Ian Perro now still has Alan Delatour in his sights. Alan Delatour, you'll know from the first few laps, followed him round very, very closely indeed. Big Honda VF1000 has been a reliable bike as well, Graham. Perhaps not as quick as the Kawasaki and the Suzuki, in reputation anyway. On the circuit at the moment, it looks like it's every bit as fast as the Kawasaki.
Well, the Hondas used to have a little bit of cam chain and cam chain tension problem, but they've solved all that by running gear drive from the crankshaft to the camshaft, and they've totally they've got reliability back to 100% now.
Just as a comparison, looking at the manufacturer's stated top speeds for these machines. The Yamaha RZ500, which is quite a small machine if you sit on it, 141 miles an hour off the shop floor. The Suzuki GSX, 160 miles an hour off the shop floor. The Kawasaki GPZ, 151 miles an hour. And the Honda VF1000, 149 miles an hour. Needless to say, they are all capable of speeds well in excess of the speed limit, probably in first gear. And speaking of gears, there is a little variation in that as well. The Yamaha RZ has 6 speeds, the Suzuki 5, the Kawasaki 6, the Honda 5. This battle is starting to happen again between Alan Delatour and Ian Perrault. That's second and third place. All of these front-running machines are factory-backed. Perhaps not directly factory-backed, but indirectly through the deal. Because it's a production race, you can bring out your RZ350 or whatever, ride it to the circuit, enter it, go through scrutineering, ride in the race, and ride it home again. But that is not what happens with the front runners. Now that probably is part of the reason why the front runners are so far ahead. They are professional teams, professionally prepared, with exceptionally talented riders. The men out in front are exceptionally talented riders of production machines anywhere in the world. Something that New Zealand has always been strong in. New Zealand and Australia, riders have always been strong in production machinery riding.
So it's mainly because of the lack of funding, really, for the types of racing bikes that, well, at least I'm used to. You know, you're talking a lot of dollars just for the Yamaha racing bike. But the production bikes proves it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to maintain, and it's a lot more closer racing too, with all the bikes being virtually the same speed.
Lap time for you on Robert Holden. This is Ian Perrault, and he's got back in front of Alan Delatour. So a great little battle for second and third between these two. One factor that may come into account is that if second and third race each other, they will allow the front man, who's Robert Holden, to get away with a bit of a lead. Often if you have people in second or third or fourth, or a little down the line, dicing with each other, they will slow each other down. And the man out in front who's not dicing with anybody gets that advantage. Robert Holden, the race leader. And bear in mind that his times were not quite as quick as Dave Hiscock's, who's his co-rider. So if they get the measure of what speed they need, and Dave Hiscock has to go out and sprint, that might be exciting to watch. Get a time for you this time round with Robert Holden. They won't be up to qualifying times, obviously. You can't run at that speed for 6 hours, but he won't be too far off it. 1:17.64, and he qualified, Robert Holden, at 1:16.59. Pick up the next lap and see if he's staying on that pace, but 1:17 is a good race pace, Graham.
It certainly is if he can keep that sort of pace up, which looks as if he's having no problem at all. He's certainly under no pressure. He's got himself a good lead.
He looks to be doing it very casually indeed. That's a mark of professionalism and a mark of the talent of Robert Holden. Perhaps has not been recognised until recent years. But Robert Holden, a very, very talented rider, and one who can get into a groove fairly quickly. Doesn't matter what he rides. I've seen him in the space of a day hop on 4 or 5 different machines and race them in consecutive races. He seems to be able to maintain that concentration all the way through. Wanganui on Boxing Day is a good example. Robert Holden, you'll see him out in almost every race. Robert Holden again reeling off a 1:17.5, so he's consistently lapping at 1:17 or thereabouts. An excellent pace. While Robert Holden waltzes away with this lead that he seems to be comfortably holding out with his 1:17 lap times, just a little off his practice time pace. Meanwhile, back down in the field, we've got plenty of duels going on. Robert Holden pulling away quite comfortably. Number 2 and number 9.
Richard Scott and Terry Turner. One machine's half the capacity of the other, and these guys are really going for it. They keep passing each other up and down the straights. Richard usually gets them through the corners, and Terry's just got the horsepower down the back straight and just keeps passing them.
Richard Scott is riding this time with Lenny Willing as the co-rider on the RZ 500. Richard Scott, remember, is the man who won the Australian Castrol 6-hour. A little off the pace in terms of a straight comparison, but at the end of the race, he was racing with John Pace on the VF1000 Honda, and it came down to a straight duel because the Honda's tyres had gone off, and the advantage was dissipated so that Richard Scott and John Pace had a sprint right down to the line.
Richard Scott on the Yamaha 500, Terry Turner on the GSX 1135, and this is where the horsepower counts. We're watching them down the back straight there.
That's straight into a headwind. Richard Scott, another rider who hasn't had a great deal of recognition, who's always been very talented, and just recently his campaigns in Australia have brought him that recognition, particularly with the Castrol 6-hour win. It's a great little dice though. Terry Turner on the Suzuki GSX 1135. And that's an indication of rider skill more than anything else, Graham, I think.
Yeah, I think the Yamaha is probably a little easier in through the bends, but the Suzuki's just got the power down the straights and out of the corners. These two guys are both dicing for 4th and 5th position.
But bear in mind, the Yamaha doesn't need the number of fuel stops or tyre stops that the Suzuki's, Kawasaki's or Hondas need. And as was the case in Australia, when it comes to the 5th hour, if they're still out there and circulating and the tyres haven't gone off, then they can compete on equal terms. Richard Scott and Terry Turner still with this dice. One machine less than half the capacity of the other, but the 500's a 2-stroke and the 1135 is a 4-stroke. 4th and 5th positions on the circuit at the moment, all of which is unimportant because we haven't had a pit stop yet for anybody. The race becomes interesting when the pit stops occur and when mistakes occur in the pits. If everything goes to schedule, it's a relatively boring scripted event. It's when things don't go according to plan that it becomes interesting. Well, I think Richard Scott is having the better of that duel, getting through the traffic much easier on the very nimble Yamaha. It handles so well. A lot harder to get a big Suzuki through that traffic than it is for Richard Scott to get the Yamaha through it. It stops so quickly. It is very, very nimble in corners and S sections. A very rideable machine. The race leader is still Robert Holden on the Suzuki GSX 1135. And Robert Holden will try and get a time for you on the gap back to 2nd place and see whether his race is going according to plan. Robert Holden just riding superbly. I don't think I've ever seen him look so relaxed on a bike.
Well, he's been away now for a little while racing overseas, and he's just got smoother, a little bit more experience.
Looking at the gap now back to 2nd place from Robert Holden. 8, 9, 10, 11 seconds. Looking for him now, Ian Pirro through. It's 14.5 seconds from first to second at the moment. So Robert Holden's race is certainly going according to plan.
Well, he's on lap 18 now, and he's got that 14-second advantage, and providing he keeps it that way, it's looking good. But, you know, we've only got 18 laps, and we've got a long way to go, and anything can happen.
18 laps and a 14.5 second advantage, almost a second a lap. Let's just have a look at the riding style through the S section of Robert Holden. So smooth.
So the terrific line through there, just apexing the corners nicely. The suspension looks as if it's working pretty good too. The bike looks as if it's set up really, really good. Throwing the weight to get the C of G over.
He doesn't actually hop off from side to side as much as he used to in his earlier days, Robert Holden, does he?
No, it's a totally different motorcycle. This one's, I think it's been developed really for this, almost for this type of racing.
And it'll be interesting a little later in the day to compare his riding style on the same machine with Dave Hiscock. Dave Hiscock, perhaps our most accomplished rider of superbikes and production bikes in recent years. A little sideways at the exit.
Yeah,
there.
122 horsepower out of this monster, and I tell you what, the back wheel will be getting awfully hot. This particular bike, you know, Tony, there's been some controversy over whether it should be allowed to run because it's got welded crankshafts and, you know, forged pistons, and the clutch is a little stronger and a few other things, but I'm glad to see it out here because it really does keep everyone honest.
As always with production racing, it doesn't matter if it's B&H cars or Castrol motorcycles, there is always some argument around the pits the day before the race. There is always some controversy about somebody who's got something illegal. And where it normally starts is somebody goes out on the circuit and looks quick, or you can't keep up with them, therefore you think the bike is illegal. And I think every team has virtually protested every other team in the last couple of days here, and nobody has succeeded.
Well, the regulations are supposed to be that you have to have 20 in the country, and they've got to be just like straight off the showroom floor. But as we see with some of these bikes, they've had to take, you know, the chain guard off for safety reasons and so forth. And, you know, once you start changing one thing, everybody wants to change other things. You know, the Kawasaki's, for instance, have got eccentric chain adjusters on the back, and by rotating them round 180 degrees, it lifts the back wheel up about 20 to 25 millimeters, which obviously gives you more ground clearance. So the Suzukis are protesting the Kawasaki's about that, and vice versa about the eligibility of the Suzukis. And I tell you what, you should have been here a couple of days ago. It was good fun to listen to them all. Ian Pirro looks as if he's, you know, going really, really well. He's always a smooth rider.
The order at the moment is 3, 5, 1, 6, 10, 9, 2. So Robert Holden leading from Ian Pirro. Alan Delatour is in third place. Michael Dowson fourth. In fifth place is the Collison Scobie VF 1000. So at the moment we've got Suzuki, Kawasaki, Honda, Yamaha, and Honda again. In sixth place at the moment is Terry Turner, as I make the order. Yes, Terry Turner on the GSX 1100. And in seventh place, Richard Scott on the RZ 500 Yamaha. So a good spread of manufacturers' machinery, Graham.
It sure is. Alan Collison, I see, number 10, he's working his way through the field. I actually watched him take a bit of a detour onto the grass there, but he's been racing now for, oh, I don't know how long, but I know when I started racing, he was the man to beat, and he still is the man to beat virtually today. I know he's really keen about this race. He's been running every day and getting really, really fit. Alan Delatour on the big VF 1000.
Michael Dowson is still in fourth place. He's the best placed of the RZ 500 Yamahas, which we've got to keep an eye on because, as we said, they don't need the same amount of fuel, they don't need the same number of tyres. Alan Delatour still in third place. Robert Holden leads. Ian Perro second. Alan Delatour third. Michael Dowson fourth. Half an hour of race time gone. Another half hour and the pit stops will start happening. If they start happening earlier than that, then somebody is off their race schedule. The Kawasaki's, remember, are trying to get an hour 12 out of a tank of gas. The Suzuki's the same. That means the difference between 4 stops and 5. But in a race like that, that's a big difference. Alan Delatour having just a little trouble getting through the traffic. Such is the spread of difference in performance between these machines that every 5 or 6 laps they're going to have to go through all that traffic again. And the difference in speed between the fast bikes and the slow ones at the end of the straight is going to be somewhere around 50 or 60 miles an hour, about 100 kilometres an hour difference. And that often, Graham, is where problems arise.
Well, especially in the blustery conditions of today. Well, I can see just watching through the S's that the smaller bikes are getting buffeted around quite substantially, and it does make it very difficult for lining up all the corners. Yeah, with the light bikes and the fairings, you get yourself all lined up in one big gust and you're offline, and it really does make life difficult.
And of course, the more experienced riders at the front of the field, the named people, are not going to give anything away. If they come down and meet somebody at a corner, they're going to take their line regardless. Michael Dowson on the RZ 500R, the man who, with Richard Scott of New Zealand, co-rode to win on the same machine, the Castrol 6R, in October. In Australia, this year it was at Oran Park, which made a little bit of difference. It was a circuit not unlike Manfield in a sense. Manfield is quicker, but it didn't have a big advantage for the more powerful machines like a circuit like Pukekohe would have. At Pukekohe, the difference between the powerful machines and the less powerful ones would be enormous because it's all horsepower, whereas at Manfield, handling is extremely important.
The Dowson Yamaha is running Pirelli tyres, which is interesting because we've got a big mixture. We've got the first 2 on Dunlop, number 3, or 3rd position on Metzler's, 4th Pirelli, 5th and 6th both Metzler's.
Intriguing that the Suzuki entry of Robert Holden and Dave Hiscock is running Japanese Dunlop tyres. That's interesting in that if you have had anything to do with motorcycles, a few years ago, if you went into a shop and said somebody offered you a Japanese Dunlop, you'd laugh at them. And often the performance was quite laughable too. The Japanese tyres have come a long way, and an indication of that is the fact that a leading entry, several of the leading entries are running Japanese Dunlop tyres, which in fact were developed at this circuit in testing.
Well, the high technology of tyre development now that the Japanese have got is just incredible. You know, they've got people on the road all the time using these guys' tyres, and it's just incredible.
But talk about Japanese tyres used to be a little like the trinkets you bought that had made in Japan on the bottom. Now people don't think that way because of the advent of computer technology and motorcycles and cars and a lot of other things, and tyres have just developed a little later.
We've just got an average lap speed of 87 mile an hour, 139 kilometres.
Which I'm going to have to come into the 20th century a bit. I have difficulty still converting one to the other, but that is 139 kilometres an hour lap average.
For the first 17 laps.
So still consistent times for Robert Holden. We'll put a clock on him again, and we'll see if we can also get a time on Ian Perro. The difference in the riders of these top teams, Graham Crosby, is going to be intriguing. If you have 2 riders, it's fairly essential that they can do consistent lap times, but there's not a great discrepancy between them. And well, looking at the leading teams, there's not a lot between them, is it?
No, the Wellington Motorcycles entry on the Suzuki of Robert Holden and Dave Hiscock, these guys are almost perfectly matched. They've been riding together now, and they've been part of a team for a long time, and they know just about everything there is to know about 6-hour races. One thing they had with the Suzukis earlier on was a little bit of oil consumption problems, but I guess that they've figured it out by now. And I probably think that it was just a few more miles they needed on the bike to run it in.
Just putting a watch on Robert Holden this time round. That gap now should be about 17 or 18 seconds back to Ian Pero, unless Ian Pero has picked up the pace. In terms of difference between riders, as Graham has said, the Wellington Motorcycles entry, Dave Hiscock and Robert Holden are very evenly matched. There is perhaps a little more difference between Ian Pero and Glenn Williams. Glenn Williams only knows one speed, and that's flat out. Ian Pero, a smoother rider in many respects. And while Robert Holden is out on the circuit, lapping and pulling away that lead to keep them on schedule for their pit stops, the other rider, Dave Hiscock, perhaps New Zealand's best-known rider of production machines in recent years, is down in the pits, biting his fingernails nervously, I expect, and a man who really does get psyched up for a race. He takes it very, very seriously indeed.
Well, Dave Hiscock, your partner's out there, right out in front, but you're looking fairly anxious. What's the problem?
Robert was just pointing at something on the bike. We're not too sure what it is, but one thing we discovered was...
Robert Holden's in the pits.
So we'll dispense with that lap time. We were just going to give you. Dave Hiscock, understandably nervous. This is a very early and unscheduled pit stop. We'll get it for you. We'll get it for you as quickly as possible what the problem is.
They're taking the opportunity while the bike's in to gas it up. Looks as if they're working on the carburetors for some reason, taking the fuel tank off. Could be a blocked jet or something, or a vent that's blocked.
Okay, they've been in the pits long enough now to have lost the lead. Ian Pero will take over the lead. So the Kawasaki now has overtaken the Suzuki. Have a look at that fuel filler. The reason why it has that little hook on the end is because the filler cap is recessed, so that if you filled it up till it was overflowing on the cap, you would still have a litre of space in the top of the tank. The Kawasaki has the same problem. Thus they have a little hook on the end of the filler, and that way they can fill up the tank and get the best advantage between pit stops.
I would imagine, Tony, that fuel stop would be brought about by a blocked filter of some, the vent, fuel vent. Could be kinked underneath the tank, resting on a frame tube or something.
Okay, we hear from the pits that the problem is a lack of power coming out of corners, which sounds like surge, either something foreign in the fuel tank or it's not picking up all of the fuel that it should. Dave Hiscock has taken over. Robert Holden's off the bike. Dave Hiscock is on, back out onto the circuit. Let's hope the problem is not a lasting one for them and that they have solved it in the meantime. Already they've lost the advantage they had, all of the advantage they had, and Dave Hiscock is really going to have to go like crazy now to make up that gap.
Well, they've been out for just over 30 minutes, and everybody else's tyres will be starting to show a little bit of sign of wear and possibly a little suspension or something like that, giving them a bit of a problem. But now that Dave's got a new tyre on, he'll take the advantage and use it as much as he can.
As the Wellington Motorcycles team have been very quick to point out in the last couple of days, they can change a tyre in less time than it takes them to fill up the fuel tank. They're on the 28th lap. So the order, Ian Pero leading from Alan Delatour, and I suspect number 6, who's Michael Dowson, is going to be up there in front of them as well. Ian Pero is still the race leader, or is the race leader, after the Suzuki pit stop. What a shame. They had built up a 17.5-second lead. They've lost all of it and more in the pits. Ian Pero is still seemingly on schedule. They want to get an hour 12 out of the tank. And he comes in, Glenn Williams takes over. The old saying, if anyone can, a Kiwi can. In this case, if anyone can, Dave Hiscock can in motorcycle racing. And I would think Dave Hiscock is going to be pushing the bike just a little, Graham.
Well, the positions, Tony, just coming up to the 30 laps, we've got number 5, Ian Perro and Glenn Williams on the Kawasaki. Number 2, or second, Alan Delatour on the big VF1000. Rod Harris on the Yamaha. Alan Collison on the another VF1000.
Okay, I think, Graham, that the other Graham Booth is in the pits with Robert Holden, who has just come off that bike. Let's see if we can find out what's happening down in the pits and what the problem was.
Well, Robert, just as everything seemed to be going absolutely fantastically for you, you're in the pits. What's the problem?
We don't know what the problem is just yet. Just started to have a bit of a miss in the mid-range. Ran about 7 to about 8.5 and kept cutting out every now and then. We think it might be some water in the fuel or maybe a faulty spark plug or something. The bike was going perfect until then. You know, it was a really easy ride at the moment. Hopefully we can cure the problem. Got a lot of the race left to go. We have got the fastest bike, so I think we'll be in there at the finish for sure.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
A confident Robert Holden that they have got the fastest bike. Here is his co-rider Dave Hiscock out on it at the moment, trying to make up that gap. And what a shame that would be if foreign material in the fuel tank has really lost them all that advantage. An excellent ride from Robert Holden to pull out that 17-second advantage, which, as we have just said, they've lost and more.
I guess that's shades of the last year's Bathurst car race in the BMW with fuel contamination as well.
We wouldn't for a moment suggest that that was a deliberate act on anyone's part, although it wouldn't be the first time that had occurred. So Dave Hiscock with the job in front of him. No better person you could find, perhaps, around this event today to make up the gap than Dave Hiscock. So Ian Perro still leading, Alan Delatour second, Michael Dowson third, and Alan Collison still in fourth place. Terry Turner fifth, and Richard Scott will be sixth. Plenty of slower riders in the field. No less valid for their entries because they come here and ride for 6 hours and in most cases have fewer problems than those at the front of the field. There's Ian Perro, race leader at the moment. Just in front of him, you saw the Dennis Newton Peter Dawson Kawasaki GPZ 900 a lap down. 32 laps for Ian Perro. And we'd expect them to be coming in shortly after 1:15. If it goes the way they want it to, around about 1:15, we'd expect to see Perro in the pits with the fuel stop. And they hadn't decided yesterday whether or not they were going to change tyres at the same time. I gather, Graham, it's a little more difficult to change tyres in the space of a pit stop on a Kawasaki than a Suzuki.
No, that's true, Tony, but I noticed that Dave Hiscock's back in the pits working again on his machine.
Well, bad luck for the Wellington Motorcycles entry. The big Suzuki certainly was the quickest bike out there. It was the fastest qualifier in the hands of Dave Hiscock, should I say, second fastest qualifier in the hands of Dave Hiscock. Glenn Williams did 15.41 and Dave Hiscock 15.61, so there was absolutely nothing between them. Well, they've still got that fuel problem.
Just get ready when he's ready to go.
Yeah, right.
Load off pretty quick.
It's a new tank they're putting on.
Well, by changing the fuel tank, I guess they do suspect some sort of fuel contamination. By changing that, hopefully they would have drained the bowl of the carburetor as well, because if there is any contamination, it will be sitting in the bottom. But I guess from what I saw before, that's exactly what they have done.
As you sit here and watch this, many people at home, I'm sure, will ask the same question as they do at any motor racing when you see people working in the pits. How come it takes my car or my bike 2 days in the workshop to get the same work done that they do a quarter of an hour? Part of it is the adrenaline motorsport, part of it is the practice, the rehearsal, and part of it is just the very best and cleverest mechanics. Dave Hiscock looking remarkably calm. He's a man who does get very intense about his racing. And they will know now that the only way they're going to get back to the lead is if the Kawasaki has some problems or the Yamahas. Well, Dave Hiscock's back on the bike again. Robert Holden helping out there, anxious to get back in the race. I know there's a long way to go, but what the sums add up to is that somebody else has to have problems before they can get back into the race. Ian Perro still circulating very, very smoothly. He's perhaps not the same rip and bust rider as Glenn Williams, Ian Perro, but certainly very, very smooth in his lines.
Well, I think Glenn might look a bit rip and bust, but he's actually quite easy on machinery. It's funny, you know, Tony, I was looking back through the entry list, and a quick calculation put $500,000 worth of motorcycles out on the track. It's incredible.
$500,000 worth of bikes, and I guess that's at wholesale price. To give you an indication, the top bikes in this event are worth about $11,000 off the shop floor. So it's not much cheaper than buying a car. With that kind of money at stake, with an $11,000 motorcycle at stake, you can see that the manufacturers take a great deal of interest, and it's very important to them who wins. Kawasaki's Ewan Osborne was out here yesterday and was most pleased to see the 2-hour won by a Kawasaki, because while everybody knows that Kawasaki, since they first came out, even going back to the days of the 750 flexi frames, they have always been exceptionally fast, and they have always been tainted in New Zealand with something of a reliability label. Glenn Williams is down in the pits while Mike Perro still leads the race and is out there circulating beautifully. Let's go to Graham Booth, who is with Glenn Williams.
Well, Glenn, we're seeing your partner out there going great guns. Is this about where you hope to be at this point of the race?
Well, our major plan was to take it pretty steady for the first 3 hours and then go from there if we have to. We didn't expect the Suzuki to have problems so early in the race. We're pretty happy how it's going at the moment.
Has this put extra pressure on you, being out so far?
No, there's no real pressure now. We just have to try and keep going steady and not make any errors and hope our bike has no problems.
When are you bringing him in?
Ian will be coming in sometime in the next 10 or 15 minutes.
That'll be right on schedule.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to judge now because the wind's come up so strong. Our fuel consumption figures are a little bit in doubt.
Glenn Williams, who says the fuel consumption figures are a little in doubt. I know they were right on the borderline with getting that 1 hour 12 for the fuel stop. And that's an intriguing point, Graham. The wind increasing into a headwind at the back straight, increasing the fuel consumption. If they get just under 1 hour 12, that still means 5 stops instead of 4.
Well, this is the thing, it's so close, you know, with 1 hour, you've got to get over an hour, and you've got to get over 1 hour 12 to make sure that you don't have too many fuel stops.
Glenn Williams, by the way, that we just saw in the corner of your screen, not only is an exceptionally talented motorcycle rider and the co-rider of Ian Perro you can see there, he is also a very talented golfer. Don't ever get sucked into a game of golf with Glenn Williams because he plays off about a 3. Perro still out there. They're going to be doing their sums furiously. It's amazing how much calculation goes on with the pit crews. They all have their calculators and pens and paper out there working things out. and it can all change with something like today's wind conditions. But it's a very fine balance, getting this R12 out of the tank of gas, and the tyre change is on schedule. Try and get a measure now of how far Pero has pulled that gap out. Great excitement happens, we'll bring you up to date a little later in the afternoon. You will be rejoining us as the afternoon goes on, and of course we'll see the finish at the end of the day. The positions as they stand at the moment: Ian Pero leads on the GPZ 900. Kawasaki GPZ 900. At the moment they have a lap and 9 seconds. On second place, Alan Delatour, Dave Martin on the Honda VF 1000, and third place, a further 50 seconds back, is Rod Harris, Michael Dowson on the Yamaha RZ 500. Ian Pero out on the bike at the moment, having taken over a while ago from Glenn Williams. When they had that pit stop, again, everything went according to plan. They didn't change a wheel, and we spoke to Glenn Williams afterwards. Let's just have a look at this pit stop. Not rushing it, not doing everything overboard, but nice and precise. Still spraying the CO2 around the radiator. Ian Pero mounted on the bike. Glenn Williams off it. We'll have a word with him in just a moment. So the second pit stop goes according to plan. Still no tyre change. They'll do that at the halfway point, I think. Ian Pero out onto the circuit. That is still the lead bike. And that was about 3/4 of an hour ago. Here's Pero getting his signal to go out onto the circuit. Very experienced flag marshal there, making sure it's okay to get out there and not in the line of somebody coming along at 140 odd miles an hour. So Ian Pero on the bike, Glenn Williams off it, and Glenn Williams, as we'll hear in just a moment, found no problems. Quite a surprise for the Kawasaki team. Perhaps not a surprise for them, but for some of the spectators who were rather sceptical about its chances of staying on.
Well, Glenn, we've seen you bring the bike in, looking good. Is that the case?
Yeah, the bike's going really good. We've cut down the revs a bit because we're just taking it easy now. Still a long way to go.
How much you cut back your revs by?
We normally rev it to 10.5. We've gone back to 10,000.
Leave a little bit in hand for safety, eh?
Yeah, we can go fast if we have to.
We've noticed you haven't done any change of tyre. When do you think that'll be necessary?
Well, the tyre's still real good at the moment, but we will change it next stop.
The wind worrying you out there at all?
It's pretty bad when you're trying to pass people. It blows you offline quite a bit sometimes.
The wind still proving a problem out there, not only with gas consumption, but with lapping some of the slower riders. Here's the pit stop for the bike that was in second place, which is Alan Delatour, the VF Honda 1000. Alan Delatour about to get on the bike. Dave Martin, the co-rider, just getting off it. They're changing the tyre, obviously. Amazing how quickly they can do it. In the space of time that it takes up to fill up the gas tank, they can change this rear tyre. This one not going perhaps as well as it might. They have done pit stops quicker than this, changed the tyre in a tank of gas, but they don't want to make any mistakes. Out onto the circuit, Alan Delatour only dropped one place, and at the moment on the circuit out there, he is second. This was a while ago. That was 115 laps, and he was in second place. Alan Delatour slightly quicker than Dave Martin in lap times. And back out now, they really just keep circulating at a relatively conservative speed, and hoping that the reliability of the bike will be the factor in the end. The gap between them at the moment is quite substantial. They're a lap and 9 seconds down on the Williams Pero Kawasaki.
Well, Dave Martin, we just saw your crew do a very slick sort of a pit stop. Are you happy with that?
Yep, pretty good. We could probably do it faster, but if we did it faster, we could, you know, it's a chance of making one mistake. It costs you 20, 30 seconds, so no, it's going well.
And what about out there on the track? I hear you're having a bit of problem with traffic.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of traffic around, and I'm not as good as Alan in traffic. Alan's better than me in traffic, but I'm coping.
What about your race tactic? Is this, you set out to drive a fairly consistent race, reliability? Is that what you're achieving, do you think?
Yep. We want the bike to last, because you can't win if your bike doesn't make the distance, so we want the bike to last to start. Probably the 5-hour mark, if there's a chance of us catching them, Alan will be out there last, and he's faster, so he'll go for it then.
So your real chance, though, at this stage is to stay there and play a waiting game?
Just try and stay in the top 3 for as long as we can.
That was Terry Pavil, the young Kiwi who's been in England recently, having an off on the RZ500 Yamaha. We spoke to him not long after this occurred. He was okay. He wasn't entirely sure what had happened. This is what he said immediately afterwards.
What do you reckon went wrong?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I really turned the gas on a little hard. Plus there, you're turning into the wind and it's like tacking a yacht. And I feel I did come into the corner just with too much throttle and the back end broke away and it just spat me over the handlebars. It's just a rider error.
Not much you can do in a case like that, though.
Well, it's very little. It's quite difficult actually turning into a lot of the corners because you're turning into a change of wind. And it can really upset things.
It's done a fair bit of damage to the bike, I see.
Yeah, I think we'll be out for the race. It's pointless trying to repair the bike and go out and just ride around for the sake of riding around.
Your helmet suffered a bit, I see, too.
Well, the helmet did its job. I haven't got a sore head or anything like that. I went over the handlebars and landed well on my head, as you can see, so the product's done its job well.
Just as well, the product did do its job for Terry Pavil, a young Kiwi from Christchurch who has been in England recently. Prior to that, he was in Australia. Currently under the wing of another ex-Kiwi in England, Stu Avant, who's been looking after him. Graham Crosby, not a pleasant experience.
No, one that I can remember. I've had a few of in my time. I would have guessed from what Terry said with the wind and all that, the bikes have got quite a good aerodynamic design now. And if like he said, going into the corner, you're going into a change of direction, and like we've got gusts here at present of just on 45 knots, it's incredible.
That was what it looked like, Terry Pavil on the ground, and it looked a little worse than it was. As you've just seen, we were talking to him not long afterwards. He's up, he's okay. His protective clothing did its job, both the leathers and the helmet, and a few bumps, and he'll be a little sore for a while. Otherwise, he's fine. This is Pavil, if you're watching. And after 144 laps now, back live with the race, still Glenn Williams and Ian Perrow. Ian Perrow on the bike at the moment. They have the lead by 1 lap and 9 seconds over the Delatour Martin V1000. Just having another look at Terry Pavil's leathers and his helmet. You can see why they wear leathers. Going back a year or two, Barry Sheen crashed at 160 miles an hour, and his leathers, a little like these, were ripped to shreds from top to bottom, but he was relatively okay. So there's a very good reason why riders wear leathers and have padded knees and the full face helmets that these days are good for protecting heads. Still Ian Perrow out there on the Kawasaki and circulating very nicely now. As Glenn Williams told us a little earlier, they've dropped the revs that they're using by about 500, so they're riding the bike relatively conservatively, hoping that it will last just in case they need a sprint to the end. But it seems to me, Graham Crosby, that they're riding well within the capabilities of the bike.
Well, that's true, Tony, especially if they're now reducing the top part of the RPM that they were using prior to this. It's imperative that they do, because, you know, operating around 10,500 RPM all the time, you know, there's a bit of temperature and anything can happen, but as long as they're reducing that, you'll find it saves the bike.
A lot of the riders were hoping that this wind would die down as the day went on, but if anything, it's got stronger. There's still very, very big gusts of wind out there, quite blustery and quite unpredictable. It's the sort of thing that I would imagine could give you quite a fright if you were just on one line and a dirty big gust of wind came along just as you were setting up. And Glenn Williams still leading. An intriguing situation at the moment. The Perrow-Williams GPZ 900R had a 50-second lead after the last pit stop, and Glenn Williams, we suspect, has slowed off the pace to conserve some gas. Second is still Alan Delatour and Dave Martin on the Honda VF1000. Alan Delatour on the bike at the moment. Rod Harris and Michael Dowson on the Yamaha RZ500 are in third place. We second lead, gave him enough if he slowed down to stay without a gas stop till the end of the race. Otherwise it had been touch and go. He got 1 hour and 6 out of his first tank of gas, and on the basis of when they left the pits, they had about 1 hour and 9 or 10 to go. So the sensible thing to do was either to pick up the pace and then top up with gas, or slow off and conserve gas. Let's have a look at some of the things that have happened since you left us. This was the pit stop with Glenn Williams coming into the pit. Ian Perro to take the bike out again. They tanked up with gas. And at that stage, Glenn Williams, when he got off the bike, damaged the number board on this side of the bike, which a few laps later started to flap, and they had to come in a little while later to change it. After that, they still had a 50-second gap between them and Alan Delatour on the VF1000. Alan Delatour having a successful final pit stop. Ian Perro trying to get around the ambulance there to get back out on the circuit. He is quite anxious. So that was Ian Perro back out on the circuit with a successful pit stop, but they didn't know at that stage that Glenn Williams, as he got off the bike, had kicked the number plate on the left-hand side. It's a little loose there. The next pit stop was that of Alan Delatour, who had briefly taken over the lead. Then Glenn Williams had to come back in. Well, Ian Perro, should we say, had to come back in. He was on the bike at the time. He wasn't quite sure what they were bringing him in for. His pits had decided to bring him in. He was a little confused when he came in, so he left the motor running. Now, you'll see them doing up this number plate on the side of the bike, because the regulations state that you must have 3 number boards on the bike. They didn't want to risk disqualification, so they came in and tightened it up. The difficulty was that Ian Perro didn't know why they were bringing him in, so he left the engine running, and they gassed the bike up while the engine was still running, which strictly speaking is the regulation. Ian Perro, when we spoke to him briefly afterwards, said he didn't think they were going to be in any trouble, although the odd ACU official was watching at the time. It was more a mistake than any kind of cheating. At this stage, Glenn Williams went back on out to ride till the end of the event. Now this is what Ian Perro said immediately after that pit stop.
Well, Ian, you came in then and the number was changed, or you put a new number on. Why was that?
It looked like, it seems that Glenn broke the number as he was hopping off the bike. His foot kicked it and just broke it. So rather than risk being penalised for not having 3 numbers on the bike, we decided to put another one back on.
You reckon you'll get away with just that as your fuel stop? We saw you taking on some fuel at the time.
Yeah, well, we filled the tank right up again. Glenn's gone out with 1 hour and 8 minutes to go. We got 1 hour and 8 minutes when I rode the bike the first time, and the pace is a wee bit slower now, so we've got our fingers crossed.
The stewards were quite irate because they reckon you didn't cut the engine as the regulations require. Do you think there'll be any problems over that?
I hope not. What the problem was is I didn't know why I was coming in. I just got the message to come in. I came in, left the motor running because I didn't know what was going on. Saw these guys put the number board on, and next thing I know the fuel cap's open and I hadn't turned the motor off. So, you know, it's a slight mistake, but hopefully it won't be much of a problem.
The result of that is that they could penalise the team a minute. We don't know yet. We're still waiting for a decision. I think it's unlikely that they will. But what's happened since then is that they went out with 1 hour and 9 or 10 minutes to go, which was really touch and go as to gas consumption and whether they get to the end of the race on that tank of fuel. So what's happened since is Glenn Williams has slowed down off his 1:17.5 times by nearly 2 seconds and has come down to 1:19s, presumably to conserve gas. And Graham Crosby, I think it's still going to be touch and go as to whether or not he gets to the end of the race.
Well, I certainly wouldn't like to be in his shoes at this stage, Tony. I'm sure that he is reducing his lap speeds, obviously in a fuel consumption attempt to, you know, obviously to save fuel, but I think it's very, very much of a borderline situation.
The last check we got, the lead had come down from 52 seconds to 28 seconds. Not because Alan Delatour was going any faster in second place, but simply because Glenn Williams had slowed down. Now, either that's a problem with the bike, or, as we have guessed, the most obvious reason is to conserve gas.
Well, the point is, if he doesn't conserve gas, he's going to have to come in for a fuel stop. And if he does come in for a fuel stop, he's looking to lose at least about 40 or 50 seconds at least, you know. And if I was in Glenn's shoes at the moment, I'd be trying to conserve gas. He's got that much of a lead at the moment. You know, I'd be hanging on to it.
Well, at the time, there were two options, weren't there? To try and pull out a little bit more of a gap to give you space for the gas stop, or to slow off, because he can afford to slow a second a lap and still be in the lead at the finish.
Well, I think he tried that initially, Tony, by going out there doing high 17s, but Alan Delatour was out there doing virtually the same type of lap speeds. And at that rate, the fuel consumption would be far greater. So Glenn reduced his lap times by about 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds, which in actual fact should theoretically give him enough time, still up his sleeve, to finish the race with at least, you know, maybe 200 cc's of fuel still in the tank, but just enough.
So 22 odd minutes left in the race now. Alan Delatour on the VF1000 Honda in second place.
Let's put a stopwatch on between Glenn and Alan Delatour to see what the situation is again.
There's Delatour around. Through the front straight past the start-finish line. We've probably got 14 or 15 laps remaining in the race. They will stop it as close as possible to 6 hours, but they may do another lap after the 6 hours. Depending on whether the lap they decide to stop it on will get them by the checkered flag to 6 hours, or if it'll be just under. If it's just under, they'll go to the next lap. And that could be very important when it comes down to the crunch, because both of these bikes are going to be tight for gas.
22.67 seconds separating the first two riders.
So Glenn Williams is still slowed off that pace. He's still doing around the 119 mark, but he knows that if he consistently laps at that speed, he will still stay ahead of Alan Delatour on this Honda. Unless Alan Delatour can pull out some 116s or something like that, which is most unlikely. Strange, actually, Graham, that the Alan Delatour and Dave Martin on this VF1000 have never at any stage during the day, yesterday or the day before, said that they could win the event. They've always said that they were going to be riding consistently to try and finish.
Well, that's probably the good part about it, you know, not going out there and making sure that, you know, you're going too fast. But I know the VF1000 apparently during practice was getting over an hour and a half of gas, but as soon as you started pushing the lap times up to around the 117 mark, the fuel consumption rate was fairly excessive. So at that stage, you know, both of them planned the race fairly well, and they've never been, I think now, more of a better chance to win the race.
Looking through the history of this event, since 1974 when Ginger Malloy won it on a Kawasaki, Graham Crosby won it the next 3 years on Kawasaki's, and since then Kawasaki have been absent from the result. It went to Suzuki in 78, Dave Hiscock won it 3 years in a row on Suzuki's, a Honda in 81, 82 was Dave Hiscock on a Suzuki again, and last year a Honda.
Apparently I've just been told that the ACU has slapped a 1 lap penalty on the Kawasaki team of Glenn Williams and Ian Perot, something that I would not have thought they would have the gall to do.
Well, that's the outcome of the inquiry with the ACU. That's the outcome of the mistake by Ian Perot. So that means that if they do apply that penalty, that Delatour and Martin will win on the VF1000 unless Glenn Williams can find an extra lap. So they have reversed the places. Number 1 is Delatour and Martin, and the official lap scorers have put them in front. So the 1 lap penalty has been applied. Well, that is going to be very disappointing for the Kawasaki team, and I don't know now if there's enough left in the race for them to get that lap back again.
Well, I don't think they'd be able to do it. However, I would, if I was in Kawasaki's position, I would protest that protest. It's a decision that really I don't think they could have made in a situation like that. It's just I consider it ludicrous.
Well, there was no deliberate attempt by Ian Perot to get any advantage, and surely that should be what judges it. he didn't even know why he was being brought in.
I think it was good credit to the Kawasaki team to actually bring his bike in and ensure that the bike did finish in a legal state. I think that in itself, you know, should balance against any slight mistake, which is a genuine mistake.
I think that is really ironical, Graham, that they were out there with a number falling off, and the only reason they pulled that bike in was because the regulations state you must have 3 numbers on, and they didn't want to be seen with only 2 on, lest they should be disqualified. They did the right thing, and in the end, they've ended up being penalised for it. That's a real turnaround. They've worked all day, that Kawasaki team, to be penalised a lap. So Alan Delatour on number 1, the Honda, now leads by a substantial margin from Glenn Williams. And I wonder if Glenn Williams knows about that decision.
I don't think Kawasaki would have even indicated at this stage, because that decision may be reversed after an appeal put in after the race. But I'm sure that I know if I was running a pit crew, I would never ever tell a rider that there is a penalty being slapped on.
Anyway, let's go down to the pits and see what Ian Perro, who was the person who's been penalised anyway, let's go and see what he says.
Well, Ian, you're being docked a lap. What's your reaction to that?
I'm pretty upset about it. We'll be appealing, of course. As far as we're concerned, no fuel went into the bike, and the rule just stipulates that the motor has to be off when fuel is entering the machine. There's no fuel entering the machine.
So really that's cost you your first place, at least for the time being.
At the moment, yeah, but as far as we're concerned, we're still first.
How's the bike going at present? Are you having a problem with brakes, I hear?
Yeah, the brakes are wearing quite badly. We thought it would be close. It looks like it has been close. Glenn's lapping a bit slower than he's capable of with good brakes, but we just have to wait and see how it goes. It's getting close.
It's a bit of a rotten end to what's been an otherwise good day for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Kind of started racing though. You can have your ups and downs.
Well, Ian Perro still has some good humour about him, certainly more than I would have in a similar situation. If they appeal, it may come down to the wording of the regulations and whether or not fuel didn't enter the bike while the motor was still running. Part of the reason is gas consumption, why Glenn Williams has come down on his lap times, but Graham, as we've just heard, there's another reason there in that their brakes are starting to wear badly.
Well, unfortunately, that's one of those things that racing throws at you at every now and then. You know, a situation where you've got 7 millimetres of brake pad material to use in 6 hours. Unfortunately, most of the brake pad material seems to wear at an even rate. But every now and then you get the pad that towards the end of its life wears a lot more rapidly than first thought. I know I've been in the same situation here, riding around with no rear brake, and I can assure you it's, especially when you've got Alan Delatour chasing you, it's something that I wouldn't like to be in the same situation.
And an interesting battle in the junior class between bike 56 in your picture there, Phil Payne and John Meads, Yamaha XJ600. They are still ahead by 2 laps. Somebody into the fence. Try and pick up who that is in a moment. Whether or not they're okay. Looks like the rider walking about. The bike's disappeared behind the tyres.
Mike Dowson.
Michael Dowson. And they were in 3rd place. Yes, it is Michael Dowson. The RZ 500 Yamaha. Well, there's all sorts of things happening in the dying moments of this race. They have been 3rd for a substantial period of time, 2 laps behind 2nd place. That's going to put them out of the race. If they get it back to the pits in time, they can possibly get it going again. It has to be scrutineered after you've dropped the bike, even if you can get up and ride it again. You've got to call in at the pits and get it checked. They could get back in the race and perhaps still be in the top 10 places. Such are the gaps when you get down to 3rd, 4th, 5th places. But Alan Delatour now leads from Glenn Williams, and in 3rd place will be Lenny Willing and Richard Scott on the other RZ Yamaha.
Well, Tony, there's only 9 seconds separating Glenn Williams from Alan Delatour, and if the appeal is upheld, you know, he's got now another almost 10 minutes to run. I think the result could change anyhow, irrespective of the 1 lap penalty being slapped on the Kawasaki team.
If it comes to a 1 lap penalty and Alan Delatour can get past, it looks as though he's approaching that. Alan Delatour is going to win anyway. Williams and Perro would still end up
in second place because there was 2 laps between them and third place, or between Delatour and Martin in third place, and that third place was held by Harris and Dowson. They're now out, so third place is held by Willing and Scott. It would still leave Glenn Williams and Ian Perro in second place.
It's very unfortunate for Mr. Dowson in a situation where you come over here for 6 hours and you get 5 hours and 50 odd minutes prior to the just before the end, and down you go. Concentration possibly, I'm not sure.
With a little bit of luck, we'll be able to talk to him shortly. Very close racing out there, not close in terms of placings, but close in terms of distance between them at those speeds. 56 leads the junior class, and Trevor Kirby has just been passed.
Trevor's been racing for 20 odd years now, and apparently this is his 8th Castrol 6-hour race.
Trevor Kirby on the GSX 1150, presented by Budget Motorcycle Spares. Number 15, the big Suzuki, circulating consistently, and at this stage back in 7th place. Okay, we've just heard from the pits that Mike Dowson's bike cannot be restarted because in that crash they wiped out the left-hand side carburetors, so it would be impractical to try and repair it before the end of the race. So that's a DNF, and quite a shame for Harris and Dowson. That's been a good race from them, Graham, but still we're going to have a Yamaha in the front 3.
Well, I'm going to put the stopwatch on Glenn Williams to see just how much Alan Delatour is pulling him in. Shit.
Well, it will be good news for Honda if Alan Delatour can pull this off, even if it is with the help of a 1-lap penalty on Williams and Perro, because in the history of this event since 1974, Honda has only had 1 win. That on the VF 750 last year with Bill Biber and Phil Payne, when it was 750 was the upper limit.
4.76 seconds split the 2 riders.
So expect to see Alan Delatour come past Glenn Williams and Ian Perro in the next 2 or 3 laps. In terms of on the road and running since the start, that would be Delatour overtaking Williams for first place. But as it is, Williams has been penalised a lap, Williams and Perro, so in fact it would just put him further ahead.
Well, if in fact he's having brake problems, then possibly the fuel economy will carry him through to that 1 hour and 8 minutes, which is it's going to be close, but I should imagine he'll be able to do it. However, he must try and maintain a little bit of an edge, or at least in front of Alan Delatour, to ensure that if the injunction that has been slapped on the Kawasaki team is reversed afterwards with the appeal, then he's still going to maintain a first position.
10 minutes to go in the Castrol 6-hour. Alan Delatour leads on the VF 1000 Honda. They have been totally unpretentious, very, very quiet about their entry, Alan Delatour and his co-rider Dave Martin. They have not pretended that they were able to win it. In fact, I think they've probably been quietly confident of just saying very little. Most of the arguments and most of the speculation was between Suzuki and Kawasaki. But in fact, it looks like being Yamaha and Honda.
And here's Richard Scott on the V4 500. He's inherited 3rd spot.
The Yamahas, the RZs were 3rd and 4th.
1984 Castrol 6-hour race winner in Australia. We haven't seen much of Richard all day, purely because he's been sitting in 5th or 6th spot most of the time. And this is what I meant prior to starting the commentary up here, that this is the sort of bike that if there's any inheriting to be done, it's going to be there. Providing, of course, you don't crash it 5 or 10 minutes before the end of the lap.
Well, we've seen 2 of them crash already. Terry Pavil had an off on his, and Mike Dowson's had an off on his, so we've got 1 of the 3.
Well, both on the same corner, so possibly that that wind is really affecting the lighter handling machines.
So third place to New Zealand's Richard Scott. It's going to be New Zealand 1, 2 and 3 by the looks. Of course, Richard Scott is co-riding with Australian Lenny Willing. And now in fourth place, we have Collinson and Scobie. Alan Collinson and Alex Scobie on the VF1000 Honda, so first and fourth for Honda wouldn't be too bad either, Graham.
No, that's true. I'm going to put the stopwatch on Alan Delatour to see what sort of lap times he's trying at this stage of the race, because he doesn't seem to be closing. Glenn and Alan Delatour have sort of established a 5-second gap, and it seems to have stabilised.
Well, Alan Delatour was catching Glenn Williams. I wonder if he's been made aware of the one-lap penalty, because the outcome of the race is still in doubt. In fact, we've just been told from the pits that it was not the ACU, the governing body of motorsport in this country, who's put the one-lap penalty on Glenn Williams and Ian Perro. It was the organiser of this particular event,
Errol Connigan.
Errol Connigan, yeah.
Errol is actually the clerk of the course, and he has the jurisdiction to issue such penalties. However, I would imagine it's going to be
the
appealed
ACU
against.
that decides in the end, isn't it?
Well, the clerk of the course, I think, has the final say.
If there's a protest, the ACU will adjudicate eventually. So the outcome of this race is not perhaps going to be as it appears on your screens. We won't know the official outcome of it until an appeal has been heard. But the way it's going to finish, on the results on the day, it will be Alan Delatour if he can stay upright for the next 5 or 6 minutes.
We've got 6.5 minutes to go, Tony. Still with 5 seconds separating the two first place runners.
Still in the junior class, 56, Payne from 30, the Webb brothers, and 32, the Ramage brothers. The junior class has certainly been the place for brothers to be today. There's Glenn Williams. Let's have a look at the gap between Glenn Williams and Alan Delatour.
Well, the gaps, you don't even have to bother putting a stopwatch on it, Tony. You know, he's within grasping distance. In a couple of seconds, he'll have him in his slipstream, and that'll be the end of it.
There he is, Alan Delatour. Well, this may save the trouble of all the hassles of an appeal, and
I can assure you, Alan, I guess Alan would be smelling the kill, so to speak. I know Glenn would be wishing he either had an extra litre or two of fuel and possibly a millimetre or two of brake material left.
But if you take the penalty away, if you forget about the penalty and the infringement, this is as they would be finishing.
Well, maybe the Castrol 6-hour race of 3 seconds between the two after 6 hours is going to be bettered by possibly these two going over the line together.
I thought it was unbelievable in Australia, where there was only 3 seconds separating first place after 6 hours. At the moment, there's only half a second separating first and second in the New Zealand Castrol 6-hour. The Kawasaki starting to blow a little bit of smoke just at the end of the straight. Nothing serious, we don't think.
We've got 5 minutes to run.
Well, is Alan Delatour going to leave it until the last lap? He's got to get close enough to slipstream initially.
I want to stick the stopwatch on both these guys.
You wouldn't believe this after 6 hours of racing. Stranger things have happened in long-distance racing. The name of the game is to beat out the finish. The old motor racing adage. To finish first, you must finish. So Glenn Williams still with Alan Delatour right on his tail. Let's just have a look at this duel right down to the line. This is as they would have finished had there been no infringements. If Alan Delatour gets in front, then perhaps the infringement is irrelevant anyway. 4 minutes to go in the race. Still only half a second separating first and second. We'll call them first and second on the road because obviously we don't know the result of any subsequent action. We know that a penalty has been imposed. We know that that team is going to protest.
I think the pressure is on for Glenn. I would not like to be in his shoes at the moment. He's really giving it everything he's got.
Glenn Williams, have a look at it down here. Alan Delatour, you can see just behind him. There's Alan Delatour, number 1.
Alan would not be aware of the penalty imposed on Glenn, I'm sure, because it's just too difficult to put out on a lap board in these high blustery conditions too.
I remember when the entry lists came out for this event and everybody was saying, how come Alan Delatour got the number 1 seeding? Well, this might prove a lot of opinions wrong. There it is, Alan Delatour in the lead.
Temporarily, I would suspect with 3 minutes to go. I'm sure Glenn will come back.
Both of these bikes running on the limit for gas consumption, the same as in the Australian Castrol 6 Hour. Both of them battling down to the line, both of them running out of gas. Alan Delatour in the lead on the road after 6 hours. What a race they have ridden. His co-rider Dave Martin admitted that he was quite a bit slower than Alan Delatour, particularly where traffic is concerned. Let's have a look again at how he got past in Concord Straight.
There's some horsepower there, isn't there?
Well, that Honda VF1000 has held up so well. They worked out their pit stops beautifully.
Kawasaki just giving off a puff of smoke there, Tony. I wouldn't worry too much about it, though.
No, it's only appeared in the last 10 or 12 laps or so. So here's Alan Delatour. He's going to have the satisfaction of coming to the checkered flag first, regardless of any penalties. That's a fantastic performance from the Honda team, and I'm sure nobody had picked that Honda as a winner. It was always going to be a dark horse in the field. It certainly wasn't as fast in a straight sprint as either the Kawasaki or the Suzuki. The Suzuki's had problems. The Kawasaki have had a little problem in the latter stages with brake pads. They've had to slow off the pace and also to conserve gas. Alan Delatour finishes first on the road. Just a minute or so remaining. It will now depend on when they decide to bring out the checkered flag. We can't be too many laps away. We started at 10 past 12 or 30 seconds past there.
Yes, I'm sure Tony's got one more lap to go. He'll be on his final lap. They won't be giving any white flags at this stage.
Either the next time round or the following lap he'll get the checkered flag. He must be tired. It's a long time to race a big heavy bike. In Australia, a similar bike, the VF1000R as opposed to the VF1000F, was beaten by 3 seconds right at the end of the race because the tyres were going off. Well, Honda are having their day today.
Glenn has slowed down substantially, and I think he's resigned to the fact that there's nothing he can do to match that performance that Alan Delatour's put up.
Well, he'll still have second place, Graham, because there was 2 laps between second and third. In the third place, Harris and Dowson are out. So the next is Willing and Scott in third place, and there's a good 2.5 laps between them. So Kawasaki will settle for second.
What a fantastic effort from this ride, Alan Delatour.
Alan Delatour coming down to the line now. First across the line. It's Honda's day. Regardless of the penalties, the protests, the outcome, any jury hearings, Alan Delatour has won the day for Honda. The New Zealand Castrol 6-hour race, the prestige motorcycle race in New Zealand, has been won by a Honda VF1000. Alan Delatour co-riding with Dave Martin. They have lapped consistently all day. They have stayed out of trouble. Their pit stops have been neat. And they have beaten Kawasaki when Kawasaki an hour ago seemed to have the race won. How many times, Graham Crosby, has that been the case with an hour to go?
Well, I know for a fact one time it happened to me. I had half an hour to go and I ended up with a gearbox problem, and that put me out. I know how Glenn would be feeling, I can assure you.
There's third place. Lenny Willing and Richard Scott. Richard Scott on the bike at the moment. A well-ridden race on the RZ 500 Yamaha, down on horsepower. but taking advantage of good handling and good gas consumption, they have finished third. So the order of finish, Delatour and Martin on the V1000 Honda win. Williams and Pero on the GPZ 900 Kawasaki, I think, will still end up in second place. And third to Lenny Willing and Richard Scott. Fourth place looks very much like Collinson and Scobie. Alan Collinson and Alex Scobie on the Honda VF1000. So it is certainly Honda's day with first and fourth places. Here's Alan Delatour into the pits, being congratulated. A well-run race, well judged, showing experience and maturity at long-distance racing. Well done, you can't take it away from him. A shame about the controversy in the last quarter hour or so, but no question, regardless of that controversy, Honda have won the day.
Well, Tony, 38 finishes from 51 starters.
That's the attrition rate. 31 out of 58. That's not bad for a 6-hour race. We'll try and get a word with Alan Delatour as soon as he's had a chance to get his helmet off and get off the bike. Graham Booth is down there in the pits. He's getting off the bike. I'm sure he's going to be tired. I don't know how straight he's going to be thinking at the end of 6 hours. Let's have a word with the winner.
I'm sure Tony is going to get a sore hand, because riding around here for six hours, you know, the hands become very, very tired. And there's always somebody who wants to shake it straight after. I can assure you it does hurt.
Good effort, fellas. Congratulations, Alan. Yeah. And you too, mate.
Well, Alan, you're the dark horse of the event. You've come through first.
Yeah, sure have.
It must have been fantastic in that last lap when you were closing up on the Kawasaki. What were your thoughts then?
Oh, well, we knew we had it in the bag. Well, I knew before then, because we were actually coming around to lap the Kawasaki, so it was all under control.
Come on, Alan, into the microphone. Speak up, boy.
Yes, your technique was to basically play a waiting race. Obviously, this paid off very, very well for you.
Yeah, well, we're fairly consistent with our lap times throughout the whole race, and although not the fastest machine on the track, we certainly were there at the finish here.
The penalty on the Kawasaki's, does that, you know, do you think that's going to upset things too much?
Well, I don't know. What penalties?
They've been penalised a lap.
Oh, have they? Oh, I didn't realise that.
I think that was cancelled out for the lead, wasn't it? Yeah. And he's from...
Do you feel that will detract from you at all? You know, the fact that there's been a little bit of controversy about that?
Oh, no, I think it was... by the look of the Kawasaki, wouldn't have gone much more by the way it was puffing out a bit of smoke.
Dave, we'll turn to you now. What was it like for you in the pits as you watched that gap close up?
Didn't want to watch. Oh, no, I knew Alan could do it. Oh, he's brilliant at it.
Was it a bit like a horror movie for you then?
Oh, well, no, not really. I knew Alan's, you know, he can keep it upright. He doesn't fall off much. Just glad to be part of a winning team.
Great. Congratulations to both of you. A great effort.
Thank you.